Welcome to the Private Practice Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Brooklyn Storm, here to help you unlock the mind, business, and spirit of your private practice success. So whether you're just starting out or you're looking to grow, this is the place for you if you really want to create a thriving private practice. Before we dive in, I want to share something that can really make a difference in your business. Imagine having an expert in your pocket, someone available on demand whenever you need guidance. Well, that's exactly what my new program, Practice Momentum, offers. With over 30 years of experience at your fingertips, you can now get the support you need whenever you need it. Curious? Head over to brooklynstorm.com to learn more. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. Super pleased to have you here. Okay, I know it's Tuesday, not Wednesday, but I wanted to share this with you because I know this is going to be super important for those of you listening who have a diploma qualification or are studying towards one, as well as those who have a diploma and are supervisors or studying towards being a supervisor. So yesterday afternoon, the 20th of October 2025, I sat down with Philip Armstrong. He's the CEO of the largest and only peak body for vocational mental health professionals in Australia. It's called the Vocational Mental Health Professionals Association of Australia, to discuss the national standards draft. Yes, it's another draft. It's not finalised. He clarified that's not finalised. It is just another draft. And he raised some important points as well that we discussed, but some of them were around the vagueness and the ambiguity. We've got issues with there being a lack of a start date, issues around there being a non-representative response rate to the original draft that was released of being less than 1% of the profession. Like, there are estimated to be 60,000 counsellors that hold a vocational qualification, and of all the people that participated in the first round, nearly all of them were from ACA or PACFA and had a higher degree. I know, it really interesting. He was also emphasising that the draft fails to create, a unified framework and lacks key constructs around this concept of a licensing system in terms of things like, definitions, the application cycles, portability between states and territories, and contains, unjustifiable biases such as the omission of graduate diploma holders. Like, where do they fall into this? They're not even mentioned. They're not even recognised. The standards don't acknowledge AQF 8. So really sort of big gaping holes in these standards, a lot of questions. I was also very concerned about the stigmatisation of the term conditional licence, and I raised that. We both agreed that the standards lack any real evidence base, which is really, really problematic, I feel, as somebody who loves a little bit of research. You can't get through 14 years of a university, career, 7 of those spent in research doing a PhD, and, not look at something that claims to be evidence-based and see clearly it's not. It's a problem. But also, we shared some concerns around issues relating to terminology like the term license, endorsement, and low risk. A lot of that stuff we felt was just very unclear, and we discussed that. And, that the process needs to really slow down for a moment to allow for broader consultation, and also the establishment of an independent regulatory authority that's separate from peak bodies to do things like manage the licensing, registration, and accreditation. So you're going to be in for a treat. There is some very interesting stuff that I wasn't even expecting that came out of this consultation interview. So without any further ado, I'm going to stop talking now. I'm just going to turn on, upload, give you the audio from the video. If you do want to go and watch the video, I will pop it on my website, brooklynstorm.com. You can go over there and have a look. There's nothing really to watch. It's just mostly Philippa and I talking, but if you're a visual person, that could work for you. For those of you who like a podcast, I'm sharing the audio with you right here. It will also be available on the association website and lots of different places. I'll also share the link on social media. So anyway, if you have any questions, like you probably do want to, I know many of you listen to the podcast while you're commuting. So obviously, like, this is not going to be possible for you, but maybe make a mental note that when you do get to work, just jot things down while they're fresh in your mind, and then send the association an email with your questions, because, you know, I want to be able to do these interviews on a regular basis. I haven't finalised anything with the association yet, but I would love to do these, maybe fortnightly minimum, while we're sorting all of this out. So if you send in concerns, questions, things like that, we can absolutely prepare and speak to them in upcoming live interviews. So when we do these, unlike other associations and peak bodies, ours are not restricted to members only. Ours are available for everybody to come and watch, right? So we don't mind if you're with ACA or PACFA and you want to come along and watch, comment, participate, join in the conversation. You're a member of the public, you're a consumer, you're a client, doesn't matter. Everybody's welcome to watch, participate and learn, because we really do believe in being transparent. You know, I think we all absolutely have a right to know exactly where we stand, cards on the table, and that's what the association is all about. So do feel free, as I said, I'll put the contact details for the association in the show notes for you so that you can send in any questions, comments or concerns. The other thing too is, if you are a student with you're studying a diploma, and, you know, I think there's even scope now if you're studying a higher degree and you want to be affiliated with the association, like students can join free. So yeah, if you have a diploma and you're with the ACA, you want to stay with them, that's all good. You can also join this association over here though. And it's not going to cost you a cent. So why not? Anyway, my lovelies, I'll stop talking. Go and listen to this. I think it goes for about an hour and a half. So, you know, depending on how far you've got to drive to and from work, this could keep you going for 2 or 3 days. Yes, thank you so much for being part of my world and for listening. Thank you. On with the show. Okay, welcome. Just before we get started, I acknowledge the diverse Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples of Australia as the traditional owners of the lands upon which we operate. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and future, and value their continued custodianship of the lands, waters and seas. So thank you very much for joining us today or for watching the replay. My name is Dr. Brooklyn Storm, and I'm here and I'm interviewing Philip Armstrong, who is the CEO of the Vocational Mental Health Professionals Association of Australia. Welcome, Philip.
Welcome. Thank you very much, Brooklyn.
Yeah, it's lovely to see you. So shall we just, national standards or became official? Big news?
Yeah, well, not necessarily official, but the second draft is now out and suggests, it's made suggestions on its way forward. Although I think it's pretty vague and ambiguous, but they're there, and it actually doesn't have a start date on it. So not quite sure when it's supposed to start, to be honest.
That's very interesting. I think there's a sense in the community that it's all happened and it's live and it's... Okay.
No, there's a lot of ambiguity in it, but there's also points within it that haven't been considered, such as the making the new standards for the diploma members. Only ASCO can change the diploma of counselling, not the Department of Health. Department of Health can't suddenly start having requirements within the diploma. That's got to go through ASCO and quite a significant bunch of protocols through statutory bodies. Then the RTOs have got to be informed and everything else. So it's okay to put this is what the recommendation is. That's fine, but that none of a lot of these recommendations can't be enforced.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm really glad that we got that sorted out right from the start. So that we've got some context before we move on to the contents of the draft, can you share anything with us around the response rate to the draft? Was that considered to be representative of the profession?
No, and that's another point, particularly when we start talking about licenses and endorsements. I mean, who asked for them when you consider actually the response rate was less than 1% of the profession if you were to take the figures given by PACFA and ACA, and that doesn't include also the Music Therapy Association, Therapy Association, and quite a few other associations. So that's less than 1, which means that the response rate was not sufficient to claim that the results have been representative of the profession.
Yeah. Any thoughts on why that might have been?
Look, I haven't detracted from my first lot of comments. I mean, the draft states quite clearly that the 80% of the respondents, which is less than 1%, came from PACFA and ACA. I think from what I'm aware of, apparently both those two associations did send information out, but I just continue to come across people who are not aware of it. But I mean, we came across government departments that work in the sector who weren't aware of it. So it's still, I think that there wasn't a very good job of disseminating the information. But I also think a lot of people just don't get it. A lot of counsellors just don't really understand what's going on, what this is about. They just get told. So again, I think there's a bit of a standoffish. A lot of counsellors and psychotherapists are really standoffish because they're not quite sure what this is about, because there's so much misinformation or different information floating around about what this means, what it doesn't mean, that people just aren't sure what's going on. I think that there's many reasons, but I don't believe that it's that counsellors don't care. The questions that we've received for this podcast just indicate they do care. They just don't get it. They don't understand what's licensing, what's endorsing. I mean, these are words, or this language has never been used within the profession before. And I think there's a lot of very confused people around who they're not sure what they're supposed to do about this, but maybe make comments on Facebook pages.
Yeah. I'm going to be sharing some of the comments and questions that have been asked in some of the online communities, and there's a lot of discussion around the topic of licensing. So we'll come to that as we go through. Does the draft give us or create a unified framework that resolves the complexity of previously fragmented things like scopes of practice, codes of conduct, and competency requirements?
It seems to be some belief that that's the case. Well, actually, it doesn't. So it doesn't set one detailed profession-wide scope of practice. So where the scope appears, it is framed by career stages, i.e. stage 1 private practice limited to low-risk presentations with conditional license, and by the general requirement to practice within one's competence rather than a single uniform industry scope. It hasn't given us a framework at all. I mean, and I'll give you an example. I mean, ACA has its own scope of practice. PACFA has 2 scopes of practice, one for its counsellors, one for its psychotherapists. The art therapists have their own scope of practice, and on it goes. There is not, I don't think that this framework, this draft has unified much of a framework at all. It has certainly done a good job in some areas, but certainly when you talk about the scope of practice, there are still multiple scopes of practices out there. There's not one unified scope of practice.
Yeah, there's no consensus. So does it reinforce public confidence in the professionalism and consistency of care being delivered by counsellors across Australia?
I think there's two answers to that question. Through my practice, and I'm seeing well over 20 clients a week, I haven't met anybody who doesn't have confidence in counsellors. Now, there may be some out there, and no doubt there are, but I certainly, when I walk around socially and I discuss to people what I do for a living and my training and also my colleagues, that I don't get a sense that there's a lack of confidence in the first place. However, given the fact that there are some who believe there is, and does this document reinforce it? Again, I don't, because the draft alone, which how many people outside of counselling and psychotherapy have any idea the draft exists? But the draft alone is unlikely to shift any public confidence in the near term. So the draft lays foundations, i.e. quality assurance, compliance pathways, but it doesn't yet deliver a regulatory mechanism or public awareness strategy that would reliably move public sentiment. I think public sentiment is today what it was last week before the draft was released, and what it was before the first draft was released. I don't think there's been any shift. And as I said, I personally don't find that the public to have a lack of confidence in counsellors as a whole.
Thank you. And just kind of moving on now to the topic of licenses. You know, what is a license under this next version? Like, what's its function? People want to know, will they have to pay additional fees on top of, you know, membership body fees? Who gives them out? And, you know, there was a requirement that you have to kind of justify why you want to opt into private practice if you have level 1 or level 2. Like, any thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, look, a license is simply a document that is given out by usually a mandated authority to allow you to do something like practice. Like we did with driving licenses and so on and so forth. When it talks about will we have additional fees to pay ACA or PACFA, or even the VMH PAA, I don't think so, because peak bodies don't have the authority to hand out licenses. It has to be a mandated authority that hands out licenses, and I'll give you an example. In New Zealand, it's not the professionals peak body that does licensing. It's done through the New Zealand government. And I'll just give you an example. Okay, so people out there who want licenses, this is what they pay in New Zealand. So in New Zealand, psychotherapy is regulated, and they have licensing. So their annual practicing fee is $850 a year, plus an application fee. So that means all of us would be paying $1,250 just off the pop, if such a thing as licensing was brought in, and it was similar to the New Zealand framework. But the thing is that the ACA, PACFA, the Vocational Association, none of those associations should be used in the same sentence as licensing. Licensing has to be overseen by an independent body, because if you have peak bodies giving out licenses, you have significant conflicts of interests. But also, where are you going to get a uniform national application? If they're both giving out licenses under the same process, under the same rules, under the same standards, then what do you need to deliver it? So where licenses do incur fees, and the fees will be are normally used to cover the costs of bureaucratic layers required to administer them. So it certainly adds another layer of fees. So when we look at licensing, according to the draft, it's missing some key constructs. For a start, there's no definition of license or conditional license, so what are we buying into? We have no idea. There's no application or renewal cycles. There's no evidence that we even require them or we need them. But also the normal checks would need to be done. So police checks, insurance, CBD, recency, verification. But there's no discussion of no field cost recovery model. There's no public register. The register that ACA PACFA used to have, which I don't believe is up to date, is not a public register in that sense, because it only covers ACA PACFA members. Obviously, we have many other practitioners who will have to come onto a public register. We don't have any discussion. What about talk of portability across states and territories? Licensing is usually mandated through a state or territory department. Licenses are generally not done through federal or national bodies, because if it was going to, it would have to be done through APRA, or the government would have to raise a completely new body, which would cost us all a fortune. There's also no discussion of transitional grandparenting pathways for current practitioners, especially those who are supervising. So all these omissions make compliance impossible to verify and difficult to become operationalised, which means, this is another reason why these standards can't be implemented today. Because if we're implementing these standards to move towards licensing, these questions need to be answered before we buy into it. I think it's I think it's incredible that we're being asked to accept a framework with no answers as to how it works or who's getting it or anything else. And as I said, there absolutely needs to be an independent body. But also brings into question that if a licensing system is brought in, then membership to ACA, PAC, or any other organisation should not be mandatory, and it shouldn't be a gateway to employment or a gateway to any sort of work. The licence should then become the gateway, not membership to the body. So it would be like psychology is today. You can be a APRA registered psychologist and deliver against Medicare and all the rest of it, but you don't have to be a member of the Australian Psychological Society or the Australian Association of Psychologists. So which one is it? Which one do we want? Do we want licensing and no mandatory membership to the peak bodies, or we remain the way we are now, but we can't have both? It just doesn't work that way.
I think that's really interesting about, I hadn't considered that before, about, if you're going to be registered, maybe you don't then need to be with a peak body, and the knock-on effects that might have for employment and rebates with health funds and things like that. It's very important.
Absolutely. I mean, health funds and people like that are not going to sit there and make sure that you're endorsed, then you're licensed, then you're registered. For a start, that's an extremely expensive process and not justifiable. I mean, no other allied health profession needs all three. It's one. We have to look at one process or one framework, not several, because the cost is going to be prohibitive, and whoever's doing them is going to have to be there's going to have to be oversight and government legislation and all the rest of it. So, as I said, look, if all councils want licensing to come in, that's fine. Not that I've heard anybody ask for it, but if that's what councils want, then fine. But if that does happen, as I said, then membership or mandatory requirements to peak bodies for employment or for health funds or to work with EAPs or whatever, that would go out the window. That would all be absolutely based on your license.
One of the other questions that came up a lot, especially over the weekend, was about people who've got a graduate diploma in counselling or psychotherapy. How do the standards affect people with grad dips?
Look, I don't know. All I can say is I've read the draft over and over and over, and it is very clear that you either have to have a AQF level 5 or 6 qualification for the restrictions to be in the first class. The second class is a level 7 or 9. There is no mention of a level 8, which is your graduate diploma. So looking at the draft, the way it is written, all I can say is from the way it's written, it doesn't look like it considers graduate diplomas. Therefore, under the way it's written now, I would suggest that technically you can't, according to the national standards. But again, it comes to interpretation, I suppose. But there is nothing there's no mention of graduate diplomas in the draft standards. Again, another reason that we shouldn't be rushing into these draft standards, because they're not complete.
Yeah, it's more questions, isn't it? I mean, what do people in this situation who do have a graduate diploma, what should they be doing? Should they be emailing somebody? I mean,
look, I mean, at the end of the day, PAC was probably best positioned to answer questions on higher education qualifications. So. Okay. Your undergraduates and graduate. I speak for the vocational sector. I don't speak for the higher education sector. PACFA probably has got a better understanding and influence within the higher education and any other peak body. So I would be putting my questions about the graduate diplomas to PACFA, and I would just be ensuring that that you're asking for a referenced answer or an opinion. They're two different things, and just take it from there.
Thank you. One of the other questions that came up was around accessing supervision under the standards and the requirement lifting from, the current 10 hours, per annum to 20 and then possibly 30. So I think it's 20 up until you're seeing 9 people a week or doing 9 sessions a week. And then after that, it goes to 30.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're a member of, if you're a clinical member of PACFA, that's what you're doing already. As far as diplomas are concerned, I think if we want diploma members to remain part of the system, and we want them to be employable and all the rest of it, I think it's in the vocational members' interest to meet those same requirements, because we're not talking about whether you've got a diploma or a degree or a master's. We're talking about if you're in full-time practice, doing the amount of hours that they're talking about, then you need to have professional supervision, and the requirements now professional supervision. If you're working full-time or you're seeing 10 to 15 clients a week, then you should be doing at least one hour supervision per week. So I don't think that's unreasonable in that sense. But I do acknowledge, absolutely, I acknowledge that for those first coming in the industry, it's that is something they're going to have to look at, because it could be expensive, but that's no different for somebody with a bachelor's or a master's degree. They still have to meet the same requirements, and they still have to find the money. But I think that's something that the Vocational Association, we can address by trying to put together group supervision and different types of supervision, and keep it cost effective, or even free if we can, depending on if our members are willing to do pro rata work. It's up to the association to support its members to meet those requirements, if those requirements are going to be set. So I think I don't think we can start playing around with the hours, have a whole bunch of different ones. But I think what the peak bodies can do is work with members to ensure that it's actually not a financial burden to meet those requirements.
Fantastic. And that could look like having a mix, kind of like now how you have the one-to-one and a little bit of group over here and peer over there. So it might be about making it. Okay, great. The questions come up around for vocationally qualified counsellors. What actually constitutes a client that is low risk? Who makes that assessment? Is there some document? What happens if you start working with someone and then maybe they move into, or they disclose something that might make, do you then have to refer them on? What's the go with that? Who determines what low level is?
Look, this is what I keep coming back to. The problem with this draft, it is absolutely so vague, it's dangerous in some aspects. Who determines low level and low risk or high level? Whoever enforces the document would need to set that standard. So the Department of Health, if it's their document, but it's like it doesn't define licensing, it doesn't define endorsement. It throws in these words with no definitions whatsoever or explanation. It just says, "Oh, look, we'll look at that later." I think I posted it on LinkedIn. I don't think I've ever seen a profession rush to embrace such vague terminology in my life. What does it mean? I have my own definition of low risk and low level, but it may not be the same as whoever drafts the draft. No doubt the peak bodies have got their own interpretations. But again, are they consistent? Are they the same? I don't know. I haven't seen them in writing. I haven't seen them put into draft form for the purpose of this document. So who sets those levels? Again, it's like a lot of what's in this document. It uses terminology and language once, and then it moves on without definitions or any clarity as to what does that language mean.
Which makes me want to, raise, is there opportunity for consultation for, affected
counsellors, students even, current counsellors with diplomas who are in private practice or studying towards, and our colleagues who have the tertiary qualifications, for consultation to be involved in the definition, defining what some of these terms and phrases that are so integral to the implementation, rollout of the standards mean.
Yeah, look, apparently that's happened. That's what I get told. But the consultation has been and gone, and everybody was involved. It's less than 1% people actually were involved in the response rate. So, from my perspective, no, not everyone was involved. So maybe we don't need to start from scratch, but we need to do the open consultation. May need to be redone at a lot more efficiently. Because, as I said, every time there's a new draft comes out, it throws up new words and language with no definition or clarity as to what does that mean. And then when you do ask, then they just throw in as an add-on, oh, we'll sort that out as we go. But, I'm a professional, I make a living doing this. I can't say to my clients, look, things might change. The department will sort of, it'll make it up as we go along, and hopefully I'll still be able to offer you the same service at the same cost. As the department makes things up as it goes along. If the department is having secret squirrel conversations with certain people from other peak bodies, well, that's not consultation, and that should not be happening. It's not how a constitutional democracy works. If the government's going to have meetings with organisations and to give them information, then they should have meetings with all those who are in the mix. And that's the other thing about the document that keeps worrying me, is it's talking to ACA and PACFA, and I said they have no issues with that. They are two large big bodies. But there's also a dozen other associations. So we have the music therapists, we have the art therapists. There's a whole bunch of them that are not members of PACFA, not members of ACA. We have associations of supervisors. None of these organisations have been to a roundtable to discuss how this document is going to be implemented, let alone have we been given the information. I've read people saying that they heard that the licensing was going to be done through the issuing of not licenses, but the issuing of what's it? I've got the word for the other documents.
Like the permits or the registrations?
Permits. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, that was it. So a permit and a license are two different things. They have two different jobs. You can't say that the licenses are actually permits. They're either licenses or they're permits. They're one or the other. They're not both. It's not one and the same. So again, we come back to this language. And then I've also I heard this morning someone sent me an email and said that apparently the term counsellor, psychotherapist is going to be protected. Well, there's nothing in the draft that suggests that at all. But if people are in the know and have been to meetings, then why don't the rest of us know? Why haven't the rest of us been to these meetings? Because I have no idea. And you, as much as I'd love to see that the term counsellor and psychotherapist are protected, psychotherapists possibly could be protected like it was in New Zealand. But counsellor is a whole different story. But we would need to, it would have to be mandated through legislation. And that means it would have to come through APRA. The last I heard from the minister, the government had no intention whatsoever of regulating counselling. Or it could be done through NRAS, which is the National Registration and Accreditation Scheme. Now, PACFA is a full member of NRAS, so there might be some discussion through there that we're not aware of, and that would be interesting because I think NRAS should encompass vocational qualifications. It only encompass higher education, so that would make sense that the PACFA have got access to information that we're not aware of. But if it's to do with the draft, then we should be made aware of it. ACA is not a member, is not even close to being meeting NRAS standards, so wouldn't be involved in that either. And the Vocational Association, because we work in the vocational sector, we are eligible to even apply for membership to NRAS. So that would be the only other accreditation body that I could think of over and above APRA that would be able to deliver licenses and also look at title protection. But it comes back to, I think we can potentially title protect accredited counsel or registered counsel or licensed counsellor, but the word counsellor, from my understanding, is it can't be protected. So again, I'm not saying these people are right or wrong. What I'm saying is that right now we've got so many different explanations floating around. I'm reading the draft, and there's nothing in the draft that says that we're going to be regulated. There's nothing in the draft that says we're getting title protection. Actually, the first draft was very clear. It said we're not getting regulated. It said the draft is not written for the purpose of regulation. I can only go on what I've seen with the draft.
Yeah, and that's the thing. There's a lot of different thoughts and views and interpretations flying around the community at the moment. It's very unsettling for some people, understandably, but it's as a result of the lack of clarity in what's being put out at the moment, unfortunately. But I guess one of the other questions that came up that kind of piggybacks onto the previous one around, what constitutes low risk, low level was how is this potentially going to affect niches for counsellors who do have a vocational qualification, who've been in private practice for a while. Maybe they're working in the space of neurodivergence, maybe they're specialising in ADHD, or maybe they're specialising in PTSD, trauma support for clients and things like that. I imagine those things probably wouldn't be considered low level. Is it likely that we're going to see some shifts that people may have to make in terms of, niching and the types of clients they're working with in their businesses?
Well, that's another good question, because that comes back to licensing and endorsing, doesn't it? I mean, they've used the word endorsed, and no one's explained what does that mean, who does it, and what's being endorsed. If I have a license, what do I need to be endorsed for? I think it's something that the profession needs to have a think about, because obviously we should only work within our skill set, which is why I think that we need to get rid of words like provisional. That's just totally and utterly. That's just that's a significant bias within the system, and I don't know where it's come from. Why should somebody with a diploma be provisional, somebody with a degree not? We all are restricted by our skill set as to what we work within, so we're all provisional in that sense. But when you have a license, it's to say that you can practice. It's not to say we're a house. I don't like the terminology low and high risk in any case. You work within your skill set, and we have a code of conduct, we have a code of ethics, and we have a complaints mechanism which gives us frameworks. So should we be practicing outside those frameworks, people can actually take action. And so there's accountability. We don't need to have it splashed all over a license to suggest that someone's below par by putting provisional. I think, as I said, that's I thought counselling was sort of not into that sort of thing. But anyway, it's again. I think if you're going to work in eating disorders, you need to be experienced and qualified to work in eating disorders. If you're going to do EDMR, you need to be, EFT. All these areas. Who's to suggest just because somebody's a client getting EFT that they're high risk? They could be low risk. Again, and these sort of areas, could be covered by colleges or professional subsets within each of the peak bodies and all that sort of thing. Which I don't have an issue with that. But I don't know how that fits into licensing and endorsing, because again, who's to say? Because we come back to do that, we need to look at accreditation. And again, this whole draft document doesn't address accreditation. It uses these words and this language, but it's got no substance behind it. I mean, accreditation. So PACPA's got its own accreditations standards. ACA's got its own accreditation standards. The Vocational Association got its own accreditation standard. All the bodies, they've all got different accreditation standards. So again, how does that all fit? Who's going to make the decision? Who's right and who's wrong, or what you come in? But I mean, it's not for the Vocational Association to go to PACPA and discuss higher education standards. That's outside their remit. But I think it goes the other way as well. So yeah, I'm not sure how all that comes into it, because as long as you're working within your skill set and you have the qualifications, I mean, eating disorder is highly complex. Just because you're a career level 2, does that mean you should be working within eating? Just because you're a 3, does that mean you can work with eating disorders? I don't think so. You have to be. Did I see a question there from?
Yes, it's from Daisy. So she's sharing there that she's a little bit confused. She's reading the association member briefing on the website, and it says that the association were the ones who got the diplomas included, but she's suggesting you disagree with the standards though. She's currently studying a diploma of counselling and is weighing up her options. When do the standards start?
There is no start date. This is the whole point. What I was saying about the standards is where, again, this is the lack of clarity. The draft talks about the diploma, and it talks about that the diploma needs to include this, that, and the other. Anyway, it suggests that the diploma needs to have so many hours of this and so many hours of that and everything else. And it's not that I necessarily agree or disagree with that, whether the diploma do, but the problem is the diplomas are already accredited. The units are already written, and the department can't suddenly say we require a diploma qualified counsellor to have done this within their training when it's not in the training package. The training package is pre-written. If the department wants counsellors who've got a diploma to have done so many hours of face-to-face or whatever it is, then it needs to be included within the training package of the diploma, which is the accreditation system which comes under ASQA. And changes like that take several years to change. They have to go through peak bodies. They have to go through legislative protocols. It's not something that's simple. And the department can't just suddenly turn around and say, this is what a diploma needs. The department has no authority within the vocational sector and the trade sector. It has its own minister and it has its own protocols as to how do we come up with those changes. So again, whoever wrote the draft obviously wasn't aware of how the training package and how vocational qualifications are written.
Yes, someone was saying, one of the comments that popped up was people were saying that they're very experienced and they've got all of these hours already accumulated. But what was released during the week was that it looks like they're going to need to have 100 hours of supervised, potentially unpaid placement, even though she's already been working for a long time in her private practice.
This is what and absolutely, and this is what I mean by people wrote this draft. Don't seem to have a really good handle on how a lot of things work, and whoever they've been consulting with obviously hasn't pointed that out to them. You can't just suddenly introduce this stuff and expect people to do it. So what we need is, they talk about grandparenting, but again, there's no definition. It's not defined. There's no examples or anything. But certainly, I would be saying that somebody with a diploma who's been practicing for 5 years, I would RPL it. That would be automatically grandparented. So it meets this criteria, and then you'd have to put in a sunset clause so that the training package can catch up with the new requirements, and then people who do the diploma as of that year, which would probably be 2027, 2028, something like that, and all those who complete it prior to then can't be expected to have done this because it's not included in the training package, and you would have to look at possibly including it as part of their employment, part of their volunteer services, whatever they do. You'd be able to have to grandparent it, and this is what I mean by the standards are a great start and great framework. I don't want to be seen to be totally negative again. I think it's a great start, but the problem is everyone's talking about like this is it, that's it. We start tomorrow. bang, no discussions, no questions, when it's not possible to bring these standards into being anywhere in the near future, because there's so much that needs to be qualified within the document. The document should be 3 times thicker than it is now. It needs a lot more work, a lot more explanations before it can be used, and a lot more consultation. And that consultation needs to go way beyond just ACA and PACFO. And the deep does need to be talk about independent regulatory bodies and that sort of thing, if that's what people want. I don't define what the industry does or doesn't do. My job is just to ask questions, and I've got a lot of questions that just haven't been answered.
And I guess one of the other questions too, speaking of that haven't been answered, is what about supervisors who do have that vocational qualification? There've been a number of emails that I've also received from counsellors who were aware that the standards were sort of in process, and they did reach out to ACA, and I know we're not commenting on that, but just to give you context, you were encouraged, go ahead and you go and pursue the qualification they have. They're approaching, finishing it now. Some of them have already finished, but now they're worried that they're not going to be able to work. Any sort of suggestions, insights that you can share around that for those people?
Yeah, join the vocational association, because we'll recognise them, and we don't have any provisions that suggest that you can't work at all. Choose the peak body that reflects the standards and the ethics which you would like to practice by. I can tell you now that there is nothing that you can or can't do as a member of the vocational sector that you can or can't do as a member with any of the other peak bodies, because it's pretty clear what diploma people can and can't do in any case as far as employment, EAP, private health funds. They don't accept them and this sort of thing. So we're advocating against that, or we're advocating to try and change that and turn that around. I will only say this, that the first lot of standards prevented diploma graduates from working at all in private practice. The Vocational Association, we spent a lot of time and resource. We went directly to the minister. Everybody knows the work that we did and the flack that we copped doing it. Read the second set of standards that come out. You can now practice in private practice as a new, with the diploma. So the department removed that, and all I can say is there was no one else in the room with us when we were advocating, and I can certainly say that it was very evenly spread as to which peak bodies were working against us. What I say working, who disagreed with us, if it wasn't for the Vocational Association, I can confidently say that change would never have happened. Particularly when you consider, I didn't read anything on social media, on the web, any formal documents that came out from anywhere from any peak body that actually questioned that first restriction when it came out. And I certainly didn't see any organisation or association, except for the Vocational Association, fighting to have that overturned. We fought to have it overturned, and it was overturned. And the restrictions of the supervisors were continuing to fight that battle. That I can only say that's a bias. Diploma qualified supervisors have been practicing for over 20 years. No harm to the public, no harm to the profession. Actually, if it wasn't for those diploma qualified supervisors, we wouldn't be where we're at now, because that's where we started off back in 2002, because the majority of counsellors only had diplomas. That's where we started, and it was only through their hard work that we were able to build the profession, then move into getting degrees and masters, particularly Commonwealth funded seats. It was only because of that cohort that we were able to do that, and a lot of them are out there still practicing. And to suggest that there is an issue with them continuing to practice when we built the profession on them, it's a travesty. But I think it's a bias that has somehow been introduced into the consultation process, the same as the bias with diplomas. And we will continue to fight that bias, because it can't be justified. And as I put when I took this battle on, particularly with the supervision, show me the evidence, show me the data and the research that clearly demonstrates that these people, A, can't practice at that level, are not competent to practice at that level, and since they've been practicing, have caused any harm. And I'll gladly change my mind. But no one's been able to show me any, and I know it doesn't exist. So the only reason that people don't want diploma qualified supervisors out there is it's competition. People don't want to compete and within the market level, and professions and peak bodies should not be driven by the market. I unfortunately feel that counselling is very much being driven by the marketplace now, about revenue streams, by developing professional development, accreditation, and the amount of people who I know who flogged workshops to diploma qualified people who don't support us or supported the introduction of diploma qualified people into the industry, and yet still take your money to teach you to do private practice when they've said that actually you shouldn't be allowed to do private practice. It astounds me that those people they hide within Facebook pages by banning anybody that questions within their Facebook page their stance, and where do they stand on some of these issues? They just ban you straight off because they don't want their members, who they flog their services to know that actually, in reality, they don't support it.
Yes. I wanted to go back to what you were saying too about the research for the supervisors and, what's it all based on. It reminded me of when I was doing the research on the first draft and the pillars that it was found upon. There was no research that ever demonstrated that without this, that counsellors were posing a risk, that they were dangerous to the community. There was no evidence that somebody with a higher degree is better skilled and gets better outcomes. That outcome and predictability of transformation and reliability with that was more about rapport and congruence with the client and the therapeutic modality that the therapist was using. It's just, to me personally, it's been like pretty baseless. I understand a need to have the standards, and I think it's good to have standardized practice. I think we do need those parameters and we do need those boundaries, but it would be better to have them based on actual evidence, and at the moment they're not, and I find that very frustrating, as I'm sure some other people do too.
Read the front cover to the draft. It says this is evidence based, and yet it doesn't support through evidence over 50% of the language and what it states. It doesn't support any of it. What it does say is we'll get to it later. Well, if I went to uni and was asked to reference a statement, I thought, look, I'll get to that later, I think they'd fail me.
Yes. Just returning to some of the questions, because I want to make sure that we do get through them all. Yep. One of the other ones I think has already been addressed, but this lady was asking how the standards will impact private practice and how will they be enforced, given that anyone can call themselves a counsellor with no training or as a psychologist or social worker?
Again, a very good question, and I can't answer it because the draft doesn't specify. If it brings out a license and that license isn't embedded within legislation, then it's a Clayton's license. It doesn't mean that you need one to practice. So if the government wants to mandate who can and who can't practice counselling, then it has to put it in legislation, which technically means it's regulating it. One of the reasons why the government probably isn't regulating counselling is because it would be in breach of the restriction of trade if it did with its current standards. Its current standards are actually not in breach of the freedom to practice because it's not enforced through legislation. So what that means is because this document is not isn't in practice now, and it's not embedded within legislation, which means you can give it or take it. You can leave it if you don't want to do it. You don't have to. Then no one's stopping you from practicing. But if the government was to put this into legislation and then turn around and say you can't practice because, then that is a restriction of trade, and the government would have a battle on its hands.
Yes.
And there again we have this problem. Is this draft meant to regulate the industry? And if it's not, then if it's voluntary, then simply one way of having an influence, you can't mandate, but what you can do is the government can say, look, if you're going to have funding or whatever, then you have to practice by that by those standards. It could potentially do that, but that doesn't move, or that doesn't reach out into private practice. Private practice, you're not using government money. You're using your own money to deliver your own services, and it's up to the consumer to decide whether they want to use those services or not. So it can't stop you, but it can if, like psychology, you can't just practice psychology because you feel like it. You've got to meet certain requirements, and then you come under the regulation, and you've got to go to APRA, be registered, and all the rest of it. So again, and there's nothing in this document that leads us to believe one way or the other. Now, I had someone email me over the weekend say, that apparently they heard we're being regulated, and it was part of some discussion group that we've been regulated, and there was title protection and all sorts of stuff. And I said, well, it's not in the draft. So either people have access to secret information that's not common knowledge, which makes you wonder why, or it's an opinion. People believe that's the way it should be, and they're quite entitled to believe that. But there's a difference between saying that something is going to be because it's mandated, or we believe this is how it should be.
Okay. Thank you so much. The question that kind of follows on from that one is, again, about the standards, and just wondering how the guidelines will support counsellors in private practice when it appears that the standards seem to be geared at mostly supporting counsellors in government or NGO jobs. It seems that counselling will be seen only really as a support to the psychologists and the social workers, or the accredited mental health social workers.
Well, that's into well, I mean, the way I read it, actually, if you've got a degree, these standards cover you quite nicely in private practice. But if you have a diploma, it suggests that you're below par. You're only a provisional, and then there's questions. What does that mean? How long does it? But also, if you're provisional, you actually have to buy a license, as opposed to if you're not, you get given a license. I think there's some legal issues, or there's certainly some ethical issues around that. So the lowest qualified person, who's the poorest in the profession, has to buy their license, whilst them who have access to more resources get it given to them. Not quite sure how that works in a democratic country like Australia, but yeah. So I'm not sure, because pretty much I don't see any difference in private practice today as I did before this document was produced, because this document is not embedded in legislation, and it's not ready to be enacted, because there's too many holes in it. There's too many ifs, ands, and buts. But once the government decides to start having these roundtables where it's going to be consulting with us to discuss how these things are going to be rolled out, then we can answer your questions. But until that happens, and again, there's no dates, there's no discussion when that's going to happen, or they just keep vaguely saying, oh, in the next 3 to 5 years. Well, there's going to be an election between 3 to 5 years. Think about that. Who says that the next the incoming, if there's a change of government, are going to support this? Believe me, it happens all the time when there's a change of government, that new things like this go out the window or get changed significantly. So to suggest this is going to happen in the next 3 to 4 years with a potential change of government, I don't know. I haven't spoken to the shadow minister about their feelings behind it. But so again, a lot of this, what I mean by it is vague. It's a great idea. We're on the right track, but we're not ready yet. This document is nowhere near ready, and that again comes back to what I'm saying is, let's not rush in to embrace something blindly when we don't have a lot of the answers. Let's work with the government and the department to roll it out in a way that is in the interest of the public and in the interest of the profession.
Yeah.
Right now, I don't think it's an either.
Is there anything, this is just me asking personally, not representing anybody, but is there anything you think that we may be able to do in terms of getting rid of this label of conditional license. It worries me because I think there are so many counsellors who do have the vocational qualification. There's no data, there's no research to say that they're getting worse outcomes, that they're, a threat to the safety and the well-being of the community. There's nothing like that. My concern is that if they are in private practice, for example, or even if they're trying to get a job and they're going up against people who, don't have the prefix conditional, it's going to be challenging. They're on the back foot. I think it's just, as I said, it's just my thoughts. Maybe I'm wrong, but and I think with private practice, they may not have to advertise that they're conditional, but they certainly are going to have to throw it on a consent form and explain to a client what it means, because there needs to be transparency. I feel like it's completely without base, and I would just like to know, I guess, as somebody who's not involved at the levels that you are, is there any scope what can be done about that, Phil? Can anything be done, or am I dreaming?
Yeah. No, look, for a start, let's not assume it's done, because it's not.
Okay.
This is not written. This is not embedded in any legislation. This document doesn't tell us how to practice now. This document is not thou shalt adopt it today. It is still a draft. It is still being implemented. I find it bizarre that a profession that spends a lot of its time talking to the public about stigma is now stigmatizing some of its own. Now that's interesting, isn't it? We turn around and do to our own what we've been trying to overcome within the public sector to get people to come to counselling because of stigma. But I don't think it's justified, and we'll absolutely be advocating with the department to have that overturned. But right now we're discussing overturning something that doesn't exist, that's not defined, that doesn't have a definition, that has nothing. As I said, that word just popped up in this draft. It didn't pop up in the other one. It's been popped up in this one with no definition, no discussion, no nothing. Again, if I was private practitioners, I wouldn't worry too much about it. And if you are concerned about it, you should join the only association that's actually out there battling for you right now, and that's the Vocational Association. We need numbers, we need members, and you want these issues fought, we're happy to fight them. But we need the support of the profession out there. So said, if you want us to fight for this, then join us and support us. Or just watch these things happen and watch them impact on your ability to earn a living as time moves on.
Yeah, I will put the details for the association in the show notes so that when we share it, anybody who's interested can go and have a look at the membership and at the association and see, what you do and how you're helping, and the services and things like that as well. There's something else that I was going to ask, but I've just forgotten, so I might come back to it after. It's the ADD, sorry. Okay, so in its present form, can the current draft be endorsed, Philip?
No.
Okay.
It would be impossible to endorse this from a governance perspective. There is no way could a peak endorse this because it's not. It can't be rolled out, particularly from a governance perspective. Actually, I did write something down to that talks about that. So
was it maybe, did you want to talk about how the draft leaves some things unresolved and maybe how endorsement is a little bit risky?
Yeah, well, when I talk about sort of what the draft, what it leaves unresolved, which answers these questions, is the licensing design, it's missing. Okay, it doesn't exist. It does not name a licensing authority. It doesn't name a legal basis. It doesn't talk about renewal, audit rules, or sanctions, and explicitly defers the program to implementation, which doesn't make sense. And endorsement is again undefined. So eligibility for private practice includes endorsement from a peak body where relevant. It says, but there is no definition of peak body, no uniform criteria, no appeal, no oversight, no framework, which creates real or perceived conflicts of interest, particularly for peaks. And it risks re-entrenching the very consistency that the standards are supposed to get rid of in the first place. Again, the complaints aren't tied to licensing outcomes. The relevant complaints bodies and possible removal practice, but it doesn't name body or link findings to license conditions, suspension, cancellation, or anything along those lines. So, can the current draft be endorsed? So, to endorse the draft before the licensing endorsement architecture is clarified, it's hard to defend from a government standpoint. The summary report shows the draft requires licenses, conditional licenses, and peak body endorsements for private practice, but defers all licensing details to implementation and never defines endorsement or the authority. So the most contentious parts remain unspecified. So endorsing that package without published guardrails about risks and legitimising ambiguity and potential conflicts of interest make it impossible to be endorsed. So it can't be endorsed. What are you endorsing? You're endorsing a pie and sky concepts that haven't been defined or rolled out.
It's been so helpful to drill down and actually hear from somebody who's got an in-depth knowledge of the standards and, you know, is able to interpret them and see them in a very different way. I think that there's a lot going on in the counselling communities that I'm sort of connected with. I mean, lots of them online and, you know, off. And it just seems like a lot of conjecture. So it's been really helpful, and I'm hopeful that this discussion today has also brought some clarity. It's probably also raised some more questions for some people. But I also wanted to ask Philip, like, you know, what do we want the department to change now, sort of moving forward, so that a non-statutory model can still work?
I think we need to sit around with the department and discuss everything we discussed today. But we need the department to give us some. Is it expecting? Because I mean this draft has been written without our input. Let's remember that. Was the department want our input? I mean, the department in February this year met with a couple of members of ACA and a couple of members of PACFA. Well, less than 1% of their members have cumulatively responded to the survey. So who they're representing, who knows? How they would know what their members want, who knows? So we need more people to be sitting around the table, but we need the government to define what is it, what does it want? I mean, yes, counselling went to government and asked, you know, can you give us a hand and help to sort counselling out in one way or another? And some commissions and investigation from government suggested that counselling needed sorting out, and that's true. But this document it doesn't answer any questions, and that's what we need to sit around the table with government for is what do you want? What do you, as the government, what do you want? Well, from my perspective, the government actually is saying to us, what do you want? And in my entire 30-odd years in counselling, I've never heard anyone use the word licence. Endorsement, I've never heard this language. I've never heard this before. So where's this suddenly come from? I mean, I asked, a member asked me the other day, actually, online, where did it come from? And I said, I don't know. I said, you need to go to your peak body and ask them. And they wrote back to me and said, I asked my peak body and they didn't know. I said, but your peak body was one of the ones that were at the meeting on the 25th that was supposed to have, and they're suggesting we should. So So again, I think we need some clarity as to what do we want, but also we need to sort out, are we having a licensing system? Are we having an endorsing system, or are we having a registration system? We can only have one that is a requirement. The others can be voluntary, optional, but one needs to run the show, and the others don't. And I think we also need to look to psychology. We need to look to the New Zealand system, where when these things are introduced, they're done by independent bodies. We cannot have our peak bodies being given access to brand new revenue streams that are predominantly about raising new memberships, because they're going to bring you into the memberships. We need it to be totally and utterly independent, and the peak body should be like the APS is to psychologists. It should offer whatever it offers services, and the members can either choose to be a member or not. The licensing as to whether they can practice or not is done totally independently. And the same with accreditation. We need to get rid of accreditation out of the peak bodies. I mean, APAC does it for the psychologists. APAC does it for the psychologists. It's a totally independent body. We need that in counselling too. So if we want counselling to move in the direction I think that everybody was hoping it was going to move to with this sort of documentation and framework, then that's what we need to do. As opposed to what I see is just people seeing more power, more authority, more money. We need to be looking at how it's been done in other industries, in other countries, and that is, if we want this sort of oversight, we want government oversight. I'm not a big supporter of it, but that's my personal opinion. But if we want it, then we bring in these bureaucratic layers like everybody else does through independent bodies, and they do it. But it should not be done through the peak bodies. And the consultants, the process of going out there and consultation needs to be looked at to bring a lot more people in there. So next time there's a round table, there is members of people representing a whole batch of different organisations, but I think they should also stick to their own backyards. I don't want to sit there and listen to some peak body, or even small association that only accepts degrees telling me what I can and can't do as a representative of the vocational sector. As I said, I've stayed right out of the higher education, and I said I'm happy to let PACPA take the to look at that. That's fine. I have no issues with that. I think again, we need representatives from both sectors, and maybe we shouldn't even be in the same room discussing the same thing. We might be a bit of chalk and cheese. I don't know. But these are things that need to be discussed.
Yeah. I wanted to share too, like in psychology, you have registration. It's not called a license. License to me feels very foreign. It feels almost sort of American. You're a licensed family social worker. You're a licensed mental health social worker. And in psychology, we have, I say we, I'm retired from that now, obviously, but the APS, for example, the Australian Psychological Society is the peak body over there for those who are unfamiliar, and like ACA or PACFA or the association. And you can join it and you can kind of move up levels. And an endorsement is a recognition that you've done extra training on top of the requirements. Usually it's a tertiary qualification, not CPD. And usually it's like another 2 or 3 year qualification on what you've done. And it allows you to specialise. So, you can become a psychologist, and then if you want to be an endorsed counselling psychologist, you then need to, after you've done your 6 or 8 years, whatever it is now, you then need to go and do another 2, and it's a lot of supervision. It's very supervision heavy, very supervision focused. And then when you come out, you're legally able, because it's a protected title, to call yourself a counselling psychologist, a child psychologist, a forensic psychologist, or whatever. So it's this endorsement, and that's what it means over there. And also with endorsements, we saw that we continue to see it in the 2-tier system in psychology, where all psychologists diagnose, assess, treat, or all of the things. But if you've got a clinical qualification, you know, and the endorsement and everything, then you automatically get this higher rebate. So I think there's something going on around, you know, appropriating bits and pieces of different models, but not really perhaps understanding the intricacies of how those models work. And perhaps not understanding historically why and how they were introduced, the implications, and some of the, you know, upheaval that it caused. I mean, there's two sides to every coin, I understand. It works for some, it doesn't work for others. But I think that might be what's happening with the whole, you know, licence and endorsed.
Mm. Yeah, well, you've got to look at the licensing system in the States. Again, the American Counselling Association has nothing to do with them. Licensing is done at state licensed bodies, and they're all chalk and cheese. I know they're trying to bring them under you know, some common scope of practice, but you know, they're still delivered. And also, there's no transportability if you have a license in one state. I mean, if you were to live on the Gold Coast in Queensland, and you get a license in Queensland, you can't just zip over the border and practice in New South Wales, or you got to get both. So transportability is another issue with licensing. But again, you know, why do we want a license, and what's its purpose? What is it supposed to serve? You know, how does it serve us? How does it serve the community? How does it serve you know, everyone that's involved? That's all. If the profession wants it, then go for it. As far as endorsements, I agree. I think the following the model of the psychologist, well, sort of I start going, well, why not just become a psychologist? If I've got to go do a 4-year undergrad degree, then I've got to do a 2-year endorsement degree. That's 6 years. Almost as best like. Yeah, it's sort of. But again, you know, it's up to the profession how we do that. But again, just punching out a document and giving it to us and telling us, I don't think is the way to do it.
No. So I guess, you know, there was a lot that you just shared there underneath that initial question, which is, you know, ideally, what would it be helpful for the department to change now? And just to sort of recap, you were saying it would be so helpful if they could name the independent licensing authority, if they were able to define endorsement against some uniform published rubric, that could optimalise risk, especially for stage 1 conditional licenses, being able to define low risk presentations, exclusions, and of course referral thresholds. One of the other things that you touched on there was really regarding domain 6 in the standards, naming, you know, the complaints body or bodies and setting some timeframes, and to state how the findings actually translate to license conditions, suspensions and cancellations, you know, require information sharing with the licensing authority. Did you want to speak a little bit more to that little bit there around the license conditions and suspension?
I think the one thing that comes in with licensing, which I don't think necessarily a bad thing, is that bringing continuity of qualifications. Right now, we have people doing master's degrees who don't have an undergraduate in counselling or psychology. They have it in some other field, which technically means they can go to career level 3. Yeah. And yet somebody with a bachelor's degree can only go to career level 2. Who's done a 3-year degree as opposed to a 1-year degree. And a lot of the bachelors are available, masters available online. They don't have as a mandatory component field placements and all the rest of it. So if we're going to start doing licensing, then we need to go down the road of you know, social work, psychology, and the rest of them, where we have a honours 4-year degree. And if you're going to do graduate work, then you need to have that minimum postgraduate degree as a prerequisite to move into the masters. We shouldn't be allowing people to move straight into masters. And there's a significant proportion of counsellors with a master's degree who don't have any undergraduate. And then they go on, oh yeah, but you know, diploma, they only do 18 months work, and you go, well, you know, that's a lot more than you did. And not only that, diploma had mandatory field requirements. Yours didn't. And so, yeah, and I don't want to, and I'm not suggesting all masters are like that, because they're not. There's some really good ones and there's some really average ones. But that's the problem. There's no consistency. So if we want to have licensing in that, we definitely need to consistency, which is why we need a independent accreditation authority to make sure that we have these minimum requirements and there's consistency within them, and we have a proper roadmap of how do we get to masters. We don't just jump in because we've done a welfare degree and suddenly get a master's in counselling and say, oh, I can do now level 3, whereas somebody's got a 3-year bachelor's degree and probably a diploma can't move into 3. You know, again, there's these inconsistencies that aren't addressed within this document that I think are part of it, part of the bigger picture.
Yeah, it's such a disadvantage because, you know, to be able to sort of skip the queue and go to level 3, you may be able to access some kind of job opportunity or rebate or funding opportunity that maybe somebody with a batch can't. But yeah, I wanted to ask too, before I forget, somebody was asking, well, not one person, a few people were asking about audits. Yeah, there's some concern around what's the audit process, what's that going to look like, who does the audits, is it going to be some centralised body or is it going to be my peak body that's auditing me? What's getting audited? Is it my files? Is it my supervision log books? Who's going to be doing the audits? Do you have any insights around, I know it's early, but do you have anything that we can sort of share with those people?
Look, yeah, I mean, look, it goes back to what I said at the beginning. I think where I believe PACMA is best placed to look after the higher education sector because it already has all this in place. So if you're a Career 2 or Career 3 and you're registered with PACMA, you automatically get audited. What PACMA does, it audits your supervision, it audits your PD, and you do that throughout your career as a member. You just download documents onto the portal, and so the audit's done. You don't even have to be informed that you're being audited. They just go through it. The only time you would be informed, I would think, would be if you don't come up to scratch. So the auditing process, if it's done something similar to that, even for I don't see why diploma people should see themselves as being exempt. But if it's done through a system similar to that, that's painless, then that's fine. But if it's suddenly this long, drawn-out process where you suddenly got to be supplying receipts and this, that, and the other, then that's a different story. But that's up to the membership bodies to they can help make that far less painless by going through your history, through what you download as far as your PD, what you're doing with your supervision. If that's the auditing they're talking about, from what I've read in the draft, that seems to be what they're talking about. But if we have a licensing system, then that's an entirely different story. Then who does the audit? Does the membership body do the audit, or does the licensing body do the audit? But again, these are the questions it brings up because it hasn't defined licensing, it hasn't defined endorsement. But it then talks about auditing. Well, we know what I know what PACMA does for its auditing, and so if it's similar, I think that's okay. But if it's different, then I would like to know about it. But there's no reason why. It's over with the Vocational Association. As long as you download those documents annually, auditing shouldn't be painful. Your criminal check's there, your working with children check is there, your insurance is there, your PD is there, your supervision is there. It's all already there online, so there's no need for members to panic because that's all part of the membership and ongoing membership requirements. If that's not happening within the peak body or another authority has to do it, then it's going to be painful.
Okay. So I think I've spoken about the questions that were coming up a lot over the past week. Is there anything else that you want to add before we sort of finish up for today?
Well, I do want to emphasise that I think this process is great. I think it's good. I don't want to come across as being the negative bunny. I think it's good. I think we need it. I just think we need to slow it down a little bit. We need to get a lot more people involved in it, and we need to step back and maybe take one thing at a time to get answers. Like, okay, if we're going to have registration, what's it going to look like? If we're going to have licensing, what's it going to look like? If we're going to have endorsement, and just approach these things one at a time with proper consultancy, letting members know that this is what's being looked at, and that they're consulted and they understand what's going on. I think that's what we need to do, as opposed to we will just suddenly rush online one day and look at a draft document that we've not been involved in. And as I said, even though the document says, oh yeah, there was a meeting held in January 2024, February 2025 with these 4 people. Okay, there's over 60,000 people in this industry. 4 people don't represent 60,000 people. And as much as I respect their professionalism and their knowledge, they can't know enough to answer all the questions that people have got. So we need to absolutely broaden this consultation process. And as I said, we need to take it a lot slower than we're doing this, and not suddenly have these things brought out and panic people with language that's not been used before and that we're not even used to. There needs to be discussion around it, and I think that's what's missing, is that there's very little discussion being had, and simply people like me sitting there talking through a screen and answering questions from lovely people such as yourself, Brooklyn. We don't have all the answers, and so you need more than just people like me. I can tell you what I think, what as far as advocacy is concerned, what I'm advocating for, but we need a lot more people involved in having a say.
Mm. And I'm just thinking too about consultation and, about even the association. And one of the things that I'm really loving is, although I dropped the ball today and didn't share the link to the session, I really value that we're able to have these opportunities to come together with the public. You don't have to be a member of the association to come along to our things, to participate, to listen, to watch. They're fairly available for anybody. And, I think this provides a great opportunity for you, for the association, to be able to also connect, hear the concerns, as an organisation that's advocating, be able to take that to people. So I'm very thankful that we get to do these. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
That's all right, and it's I might be the one sitting here answering the question, but there's a lot of people behind the scenes doing a lot of work. But our president and secretary and yourself, we've got an advisory committee, all adding to it, and public officer. So there's a lot of people behind the scenes doing a lot of work. I just get to sit here and answer the questions, but I think we need to acknowledge everybody who's involved in this process, and that goes for the other peaks. Now, there's people there working very hard, trying their best, and the fact that I'm asking questions, but hopefully I'm not said too much, but I have to answer questions too from other organisations. So it's all fair, it's what we do. But certainly all those people behind the scenes need to be acknowledged too.
Absolutely. And moving forward, we'll be having more of these, won't we, where they are public and people can come, and they're quite informal, aren't they? Everybody's welcome to come up and ask a question or to pop a question in the comments there. And if one of the members of the association is able to speak to it, absolutely we will. And if not, we'll say so. But that's also a pathway for people to share concerns and get some answers from a reliable source, as opposed to getting caught up and swept away in some of the conjecture and the dialogue that's perhaps a little bit misinformed, a little bit distracting in some of the online spaces.
Yeah, I think we should keep the conversation going and keep it open. And I'd suggest to those people with the Facebook pages and these other social media ones who don't like people asking questions, I think you need to do a bit of self-reflection there, honestly. We don't censor our questions. If we can't answer a question, we'll tell you. And if you don't like the answer we give, we're happy to accept that not everyone agrees with us. That's fair enough. We live in a democracy, and everyone is entitled to their fair say. And as I said, as long as people can separate opinions from fact, as in reference data that we can support, then I think there's plenty of discussions to be had.
Yeah, And too, like, this is just a little bit off topic, but I just wanted to share it with you. I was saying to somebody recently, like, I really feel that this is such an exciting time in the profession, and you know, this is an opportunity for us to, like, what's happening is history is actually being made. You know, at some point down the track, this will all be done and dusted, and all the future counsellors, it'll just be, you know, normal for them. But for us, we're kind of in it, and this is I think it's a very exciting time, and I think there's absolutely opportunities for people to get involved, participate, you know, have an impact, have a say. And I would just encourage anybody who's a counsellor at the moment with a vocational qualification to, you know, share your thoughts, share your ideas, you know, connect with the association. Like, you can email Philip, you can go to the website, there's contact forms there, you can email, you can phone. Everybody's very approachable. You can come along to these things, but really you don't want to look back and just say, yeah, you know, that was all happening and I wasn't involved. So it's a very exciting time, and I would say absolutely have your voice heard and do it through the right channels.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, if you're happy to leave it there, are you good? I'll just check in. Tyler and Matthew and Daisy, I'm not sure if you're all still there. But if you have a question, please feel free to turn on your camera or your microphone, or pop it in the notes. Otherwise, if there's nothing for now, that's totally fine. You'll be able to comment. I will share the link on YouTube, on the podcast, on social media. The association is going to share it. We'll all share it, don't worry, and you'll be able to comment. Just tag, you know, Philip, myself, anybody else, and we will certainly get back to you as quickly as we can with information or answers. Okay. No.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Philip. Really appreciate you giving up some of your time today.
No worries. My pleasure. Yeah. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
And that's a wrap for this episode of the Private Practice Podcast. So as you reflect on today's insights, imagine creating real success in your private practice without going down rabbit holes or exhausting yourself with business activities that don't move the needle. With Practice Momentum, you have push of a button help available on demand. It's like having an expert in your pocket ready to guide you whenever you need it. Visit brooklynstorm.com to discover how Practice Momentum can transform your approach to building a thriving practice. I'm Dr. Brooklyn Storm, and I'll see you next time as we continue exploring the mind, business, and spirit of private practice success.